Good evening. Yeah, shalom everybody. Good evening. This is your brother Joseph, and here to talk to you about a little bit more about the Son of Elohim. And a good question was brought up, a good statement was brought up, basically talking about what about the wise men that went and worshipped the Messiah? If you're saying that the Messiah was not Elohim, which is what I'm definitely saying, and was what the scriptures definitely say. But this is a good question. What does it mean when the wise men came and worshipped him, and even Herod said that he would go and worship him? And also it makes it very clear, Exodus 34, you're not to bow to any other mighty ones. And so there's this idea for people that are coming out of Christianity, they're coming with a New Testament background versus a Tanakh background. They try to understand somehow that the man who walked the earth we know as Yehoshua HaMashiach. They somehow try to make him the one, the great I am that I am, the great Almighty, and it's actually the opposite of everything that he said, and this should never happen. But I know, brothers and sisters, many people are coming out of Christianity, they're coming out of this, and a lot of them have come into the Hebrew roots, and they're really seeking to understand, and they just carry this little bit with them into it. Ultimately, the Almighty is one, and he is not his son. But we're going to address this very clear. But I put another video up called the Son of Elohim. He's the Messiah, the Son of Elohim. The apostles make this very clear. And so, anyways, looking at this, we're going to turn to the Hebrew Matthew, because this will help clarify. So again, this is the Hebrew Matthew. And it says here, 3 times in Matthew chapter 2, it says, and it came to pass that when Yeshua was born in Bethlehem of Judah in the days of Herod the king, behold, astrologers came from the east to Jerusalem. They said, where's the king of the Jews who has been born? We have seen his star in the east, that we have come with important gifts to worship him. That's verse 2. And then skipping down, then Herod says, he said, go inquire concerning the child, and when you find him, inform me, and I will go worship him. And then it says the wise men came in verse 11. They came into the house, found his mother Mary, and knelt before him and worshipped him, opened their sacks, and gave him the gifts. Okay, the word worship him literally means to bow down. Now this isn't an act of reverence, and obviously they bow down with much respect. And we got to look at this word. So the word is used in various places in the Tanakh. So we want to understand, now that we have the Hebrew text, we can understand. See, there's the there it is, the Hebrew word, and they're translating in English. George is translating it, here we go, worshipped. And this is because George more than likely was a Christian, and he was translating it with his Christian theology, because to him, of course, they would be worshiping him because they think he's the Almighty. But this is actually false. This is Trinitarian doctrine, and it goes against the Tanakh. It goes against the Torah. So this is the Torah, and with the Tanakh, with the Torah and things. So the idea is, so in ancient Israelite customs, in ancient Israelite times, we know they were forbidden in Exodus 34. This is brought out very clear. Exodus 34, verse 14. It says, you must not worship any other God or any other El, okay? But what does it say in the Hebrew? It says, Ki lo tishtachave la'el acher. So you are not to bow, literally, to them in homage, okay, to any other deity, any other mighty one, any other, so we see here that they were bowing. This is the exact same word that they did in the Hebrew. It's the exact same word that we're not supposed to do it, and these wise men did it, and Herod said he would do it. And we know that, so there's obviously some kind of confusion here, but actually there's not, because when you look at this, let's go to 1 Kings chapter 1:23. 1 Kings 1:23, and I'm looking it up in the JPS translation. I'm going to read from the Masoretic text. 1:23 says, now here's the prophet Nathan. Verse 22, when she was still talking to the king, when the prophet Nathan arrived, they announced to the king, the prophet Nathan is here. This is a Navi, this is a prophet. and he entered the king's presence. So here comes this Navi before the great King David, and it says before the presence of the king, which is Lifnei Hamalech, the king. It says Vayishtahu, Vayishtahu. One more time. Vayishtahu Lamalech. Okay, and then it says Al Panaiv Arza, with his face to the ground. So he bowed to the king. He bowed, which is the same word. It's the exact same word. The root, it's basically the root shin chet hey is shacha, and there the form of the verb that it is to bow down. It means to bow down to the king. So we see in Exodus 34, it says, "Don't bow to any el." But obviously they understood that when they had a great ruler in front of them, they could bow to him, but they knew they weren't bowing to him in the same way that they would bow to the Almighty. So this, you got to read the context, you got to know the culture, you got to know this. You can't just extract words like it's in a vacuum and think that, wow, they bow down to this little baby here in the land of Bethlehem, and obviously they're worshiping him as they would the creator of the universe. Those wise men, we don't know exactly what they were doing. They're astrologers. But in the Hebrew context, because they bowed to him in the same way Nathan bowed to David, there's nothing out of the context there that was actually fine. We find also in the same chapter that Bathsheba, in verse 31, it says, and Bathsheba bowed in low homage. This is her husband, and he's also the king. To the king with her face to the ground, she said, so she bowed. It's the same word, Vatish Tahu Lamalek, and then it says, Vatomer Yehi Adonai Hamalek David Leolam. So may my Lord David live forever. So she called him, it's actually Adoni, my Lord. So this is the word Adon, Adoni, Adonai. These words. So Adoni means my mighty one, or not my mighty one, but my Lord, my master. And so we see in the Greek the word kurios is also used for master and Lord and owner. And so these are titles that are used. And so it's fine to call David Adoni Hamalek, okay? And it's fine to call Yehoshua or Yeshua Adoni Hamalek. But it's wrong to call him my Elohim. That's wrong, and it's wrong for us to call David that too. And David was also a Mashiach. He was anointed. So this is how you can really see the context. Now let's go even deeper. Let's look at what King David did and how he also did this. And so we know that these were observant people and they were righteous, even though they were imperfect. They were still considered righteous. And Psalm 24, verse 8. In the English, 9 in the JPS, it says here, now David was going into the cave with Shaul. Shaul was trying to attack David. But David rebuked his men, verse 8, and did not permit them to attack Shaul. Shaul left the cave and started on his way. Then they left the cave and started on their way. Then David also went out of the cave and called after Shaul. So Shaul left the cave and started on his way. David also went out of the cave and called after Shaul. And what does he call Shaul? He says, Adoni Hamalek. He calls him that. And then it goes on, and then it says, David, with his face to the ground, Vayishtahu. He bowed. So David calls Shaul his master and his king, and he bows down because he respected the authority upon him. Shaul was also anointed. He was also a Mashiach. He was also reigning as king of Israel. I'm not saying that he's like the great Mashiach, but literally he was anointed. When you're anointed, you're called Mashiach in the scriptures. This is what Mashiach means. And so this is a leadership role. They were men, and they were allowed to bow to them as their leader of Israel. And so there's nothing wrong with any person bowing to the Mashiach, the great Mashiach that was promised to come, who is the great king, and he was he is a king, a Melech Gadol. He is a great king, and he is also our master, Adoni, my master, or our master is Adonenu. So just saying, brothers and sisters, this is all in the context. And we also see that Joshua 5, 14, it says here, Joshua 5:14 says, I'm in Judges. Joshua 5:14 says that he bowed to an angel, a malak. It says, and once Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing up before him with his drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, are you one of us or one of our enemies? He replied, no, I'm a captain of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's host. Now I have come. And Joshua threw himself face down to the ground, prostrating himself, and said, and so the word is, Vayishtahu. He prostrated himself before this angel, and he says, what does, it says, Ma Adoni Madeber El Avdo. What does my Lord command of his servant? So he's called this angel his Lord. So look at this, brothers and sisters, just to wrap this up. When the wise men, they came and bowed down to the Messiah in the Hebrew Matthew, it is in verse 11. It's the same word that's used in the scriptures, Vayish Tachaveu, and this is when the wise men bowed down to him. It's all part of this root word, which is Shen Het Hey. It's right here, and it means to bow down. And this is what they did. And it says the first meaning, bow down, prostrate oneself before a monarch or superior in homage. This is fine. This is kosher. This is Israelite behavior. However, also number two says, the number two definition says before God in worship, etc. So you have to know the context. So are you going to say that King David was worshiping Shaul because he shachab before him? No. You would not say that. It's the same way the wise men were not worshiping the Son of the Most High when he was born, the King of the Jews. They were actually going to. He was Melech HaYehudim. They were bowing before him in prostrating themselves before a monarch or a superior. They recognized that, and though you're not supposed to do this to shachab before any other Elohim. You shouldn't bow down to an idol. You shouldn't bow down to some other, anything like that. Any foreign object, anything like that. And you should never make a man your Elohim either. That's blasphemy. So verse 9 says, D, not verse 9, but D says you could also shachab before an angel, as we saw Joshua or Yehoshua did in the book of Joshua. Chapter 5. So shachah means to bow. Shachah means to bow down, to crouch, to be humbled. This is. We see that this was done. We see that in the last thing I want to leave you with in 1 Chronicles 29:20. 1 Chronicles 29:20. This is an amazing scripture. And it says here, David is praying to the Almighty. And David had the whole assembly there. And he says, V'yomer David lechal hakahal baruchu na et Yehovah Elohechem vayivarachu kal hakohal leYehovah Elohai avotehem vayikdu vayishtachavihu leYehovah la malech. So the whole assembly should bless the Almighty of their fathers, Yehovah, Elohim of their fathers, and they bow their heads low to Yehovah and to the king. So they understood the difference there. So this is incredible to see the two differences. And so, brothers and sisters, this word shachah, though it has been, you can use it as an act of worship. It was also, and it was more often, from what I can see in the scriptures, used whenever it was referring to a human. In Israelite culture, Hebrew culture, Tanakh culture, it was understood when they bowed or crouched before a king, they were not worshiping him as their mighty one, but they did acknowledge that they were superior. And the anointed kings of Israel were the authority in the land as far as humans were concerned. However, even the prophet bowed before the king. And even David, who was later to become king, bowed before Shaul. And so this is incredible stuff. Let us keep seeking and searching. These questions are great. And brothers and sisters, when we look into them, we can clearly see that no man is Elohim. The Son of Man is not Elohim. The Son of Elohim is not Elohim. And the Mashiach is not Elohim. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yehovah, He alone is Elohim. Shalom, everybody, and Yah bless and keep.